Joining us on the pod today, he's written for The Times, The Atlantic, and Slate. He is currently a staff writer at The New Yorker, where he most recently conducted some pretty excellent interviews with former Trump aide Cliff Sims and future reverse mortgage salesman Rudy Giuliani. Welcome, Isaac Chotiner. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
All right, let's talk about these interviews. And if you haven't read them, we never suggest pausing podcasts here on a moral level, but you should read them. What were you interested in learning from Rudy Giuliani and Cliff Sims?
Well, I think that they're two different people, and so I was interested in a couple different things. With Giuliani, I was interested in there have just been so many stories coming out of the White House and from the president's legal team about exactly what they were trying to say and what they made of all these different things going on with Michael Cohen. And I know sort of nailing Rudy Giuliani down on any of these things are hard, but I just sort of wanted to get a better idea of exactly what their response was. This was last week to the BuzzFeed story about Trump pressuring Michael Cohen to lie to Congress, which obviously the story's been very contentious and has been disputed by people, including the special counsel's office. And then with Cliff Sims, it had been, basically I read this book, his new book, Team of Vipers, which is about his time working in the White House. And the sort of portrait that he puts forward of the president and his administration was interesting to me. And then just more broadly, this idea of people who are going to work for the White House for the Trump administration, going along with very controversial policies and then making a lot of money writing books about it.
With Giuliani, right, it's everyone's trying to pin him down, and he's sort of he's all over the place. It's sort of a fusillade of words, some of them seeming to be intentional, some of them unintentional. And yet even inside of that interview that you conducted with him, you also wanted to get at something deeper. Rudy's about to jump in the shower, but he ends up talking about what it's going to say on his tombstone. Why? What are you trying to, so this goes, well, I think it goes beyond what other interviewers have done. It seems like you're trying to get at something underneath, something about his motivations.
Well, I guess something that's interesting to me about the Trump administration, I had two related things. One is the degree to which people are sort of true believers in the president, and some of them are and some of them aren't. I think most of them are not. And then also just the degree to which people know that a lot of what they're doing, what they have to say publicly for this administration is not true, and that has some cost to their integrity or to their sense of self. And so I was interested in that in both cases, and especially with Rudy, who, my sort of pop psychological reading is that he's someone who knows that he's saying a lot of things that are not true. And this is a guy who's had a career, controversial career, but a very sort of important career, I think, in American and a New York political history, and that this is sort of where he's ended up. And so, yes, that was definitely psychologically interesting to me.
Right. It's like there's these two kinds of figures inside of Trump's world. There are those who were just on the outskirts of politics or even polite society. And then there are people, whether it's Chris Christie, Rudy Giuliani, his attorney general nominee, John Bolton. These are people who had reputations, careers, we could define those reputations positively or negatively, who are now kind of hitching their name to Donald Trump. And it seems like a lot of them do struggle with that.
Yeah, and, I think that's true. And I also think with the case, one of the things, the Sims book, which one of the things I tries to raise in the interview with him is that, I think sort of Trump inherently, you do have these figures like Christie and Giuliani, but you do have these other figures who I think are basically out to make a quick buck. They've joined the White House because they want some sort of outside business deal. And, I think one interpretation of that is that the president himself is someone who very clearly cares about his own business interests. He's surrounded by people who have been involved with various forms of corruption and lying to investigators. And I think that does stem from the top, that if you have an administration this chaotic and this crazy, where there's this much sort of stuff going on that is, not always 100% legal, that you're sort of destined to end up surrounding yourself with people who are also looking to make a quick buck.
Yeah, and right, and then that's, I suppose, I think a lot of people out there, myself included, one of the questions you ask, how does somebody get themselves to do that? Are they different from me? Is there something broken about these people, or are they just people in a different circumstance? And do you feel like in these conversations, so with Cliff Sims, you pushed him pretty hard on questions around Charlottesville, on questions around birtherism, and it's hard to tell, even in that conversation, whether he's not open to you or he's not even able to process it himself. What do you think?
Well, I think that one of the things for Sims and for other people is if Sims's book is very critical of people around Trump, but it's not really critical of the president himself. He basically still respects the president. He doesn't agree with everything President Trump says. He says, sometimes he's kind of uncouth with his words, but basically he likes him and he thinks he's been misserved by his staff. And, I think for a lot of people in the Trump orbit, and, Sims has been rumored to wanting to have a political career as a Republican in Alabama, where he's from. I think that they're trying to walk this line, which is you want to sell a book or you want to do something that makes money and, gets you a certain amount of attention, so you have to have some criticisms in there. But you also want to stay on the president's good side, and so you kind of have to tiptoe around what you say about him. I mean, in Sims's case, it doesn't seem to have worked because apparently Trump is angry about the book and tweeting about it, even though Sims himself is pretty complimentary to Trump. But I think that that's one of the things going on, that just because of the character of the president and who he is and how he responds to stuff, that people kind of have to tiptoe around what they say and sort of what it would mean for their future in a Republican Party that for now is still led by Donald Trump.
All right, this is going to demand some speculation, I guess. But you're talking to Rudy Giuliani. He is currently one of the most important figures in American public life. He is the lawyer to the President of the United States. And yet, I think as a political culture, we genuinely don't know if he knows what he's doing. We genuinely don't know if he's even, up to this task at the most basic level. You just had a conversation with him. Do you think he's sharp? Do you think he's able to follow the plot here?
Yes, I do. And I actually thought he was responding to me very quickly and clearly. He said a bunch of things, as he has in other interviews, that may be contradictory in some way, but I don't think that was because he's somehow losing it, and I have no reason to speculate. I mean, he may have changed as a person, what he wants in life, what he's willing to do may have changed, but I don't think he's sort of losing it in any way. That was not I've seen speculation about that, and I think that's I'm not a doctor, so I would not speculate about that, but he seemed very clear to me.
I suppose it's this question is there a method to the madness? That when he goes on television in the span of 2 or 3 days and says multiple contradictory statements, when he makes outlandish claims about collusion, when what do you think?
Go on.
Sorry.
Well, no, I was just going to say, I think just to throw in a word for Rudy here, half jokingly, I mean that essentially, I think people maybe sometimes understate how hard it would be to work for this president. You have a president who changes his story all the time. I can only assume that the president, there have been news reports about this, is calling up people who work for him, like Rudy Giuliani, or people, Kellyanne Conway, whoever it is, in the Oval Office, probably giving them different marching orders every single day about what they should say. And he's tweeting different things that change rapidly. So I don't think there's any way to really go out and defend this president and seem like you're a logical person or you're saying things that make some sort of coherent sense. And I think that's led to a lot of speculation about the people around him. Do they know that they're lying all the time? And I kind of assume most of them do, and most of them don't have a choice because, this is the man that they serve, and this is the character that he has.
So there's others who have left the administration, people like, Mattis, people like John Kelly, or at least has Mattis officially left yet? I've been losing track.
Yeah, he has.
Yeah. So Mattis or Kelly, are you interested in talking to these people? Do you think that would you be interested in hearing their perspective?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Mattis and Kelly would be two people that I'd be fascinated to hear their perspective. I also, I think that, yes, no, that's the short answer is I am. Why? What does something appeal to them about you more than other people who've been interviewed?
I think that there is, I would put Rex Tillerson, Mattis, Dina Powell, John Kelly in this category of people, unlike Sims, unlike Rudy Giuliani, and even for a time, unlike Chris Christie, who seem to have signaled either explicitly or implicitly that they were going in with eyes open, that they knew who Trump was, and in some sense they were doing it for the country. And these are the people who have actually been more quiet. And I'm wondering if you think that there's a distinction there, and if you think these people have an obligation to say more about what was going on while they were in the White House.
I mean, I think that if you really think, as there have been sort of reports that people like Kelly and Mattis think that what's been going on with the Trump administration is some sort of, you know, I don't know if they've ever used the phrase national emergency, but that they're worried about it, then yeah, I do think they have reasons to speak out. I mean, I also think, you know, if you are someone who believes that going to work for the Trump administration is basically morally objectionable, which I think a lot of liberals, a lot of people in America think, I think at the very least, if you're the Secretary of Defense, you can make a sort of case for why we want, or we being people who believe this, believe that, you know, Jim Mattis should be Secretary of Defense, or, you know, McMaster should be National Security Advisor rather than Mike Flynn. That makes some sense to me, even if you think Trump is engaged in policies that are, you know, immoral and he shouldn't be served. I think it's much harder to make the case that David Sims should go serve in the communications office of the White House. Sorry, Cliff Sims. Yeah. David Sims writes for The Atlantic. Apologies to David Sims.
Tough hit on David Sims.
So, you know, I think that those people in a way are more interesting because I think whatever you think of the choices they've made, I think the sort of ethical decisions around them are more complex.
So just to close out here, you know, your interviews with these figures have been unique in trying to attack the moral reasoning of these candidates. Is there an implicit critique about the way people like Cliff Sims, people like Rudy Giuliani, people like Kellyanne Conway have generally been treated in the media? Do you think that these people have not been given the kind of scrutiny that they deserve?
No. I mean, well, you know, look, I think Giuliani and Kellyanne Conway have been given a lot of really tough interviews. So I wouldn't want to say that. I think that the response to Cliff Sims's book, I was sort of surprised by that he was sort of presented on some segments of shows that I saw as kind of a figure who is, you know, sort of speaking out in some way or was writing sort of a brave book that was truth-telling, and, you know, I thought that should be interrogated. I mean, this is a guy who basically says, as we covered in my interview, that the president is in no way a racist, and sort of had a both sides approach to Charlottesville, and Sims and Trump both, obviously. And so I was sort of surprised that he had not been given a tougher interview. But yeah, you know, look, I think that people who are in this administration, and we look at some of the things going on. I mean, look, this is true in any administration. I would like to think that people in the Obama administration, which you served in, that there are policies that people don't like about Yemen or anything like that, that people who served in the administration are asked tough questions about them. But I think in this administration, as much as ever, more so, there's a need to put tough questions to people, and I think that there are a lot of good journalists who are doing that.
All right, Isaac Chotiner, thank you so much for joining us.